Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 7, so I'll start spouting. A few things to say before we begin. I think Nick and Emily and I talked each other into this idea. We're new residents to Bute. We've been here about a year and a half. I came here when I was a child, fell deeply in love with it. How could you not love Bute? You know, this is my other and better half, Daniele. How he puts up with me, I don't know, but hey, this is an evening of miracles. We were sat having coffee, 40 years in London as a cleric with various churches. I'll explain that later. Christianity. I'll explain that later. We were sat, then when I moved to London in the early 80s, 1980s, I mean, you know what England is like. You know, everything's in this sort of hub. If you want a bit of a life, you have to go there at least for a while. So I moved up there to do that for a while, got stuck there for 40 years. And when I first went there, it was pretty and it was clean and people wouldn't be nice, but they wouldn't be nasty, which was okay. About a year and a half ago, we were sat, now this is Bond Street, so you're not looking at one of the backwaters, okay? In one of the cafes, little pop-up cafeterias outside one of the big shops. Have you heard of Teen Wilding? It's, well, you're aging yourselves. If you are under 19, you go on the internet, the various platforms with all your mates, and agree to turn up at a shop at a time and a place and rob it totally, trash everything, and beat everybody up on the way out. So we were sat minding our business in a little cafe in Bond Street as this army of about 100 kids started rushing down the road, literally pushing people my age out the way and beating them to the ground. To which I said to Dan, enough's enough, we're going to Bute. And we haven't looked back since. Why is all this free stuff around? You can thank Nick and Emily for some of it. We provided the booze, I'm a clergyman. Because it's our way of saying to everybody, we love Bute, nice to meet you, new chums, new colleagues, you know, all the rest of it. So it's a way of saying hello. And it's also a way of getting this wonderful little shop on the map a tiny, tiny bit more. I don't like the phrase new age. What was the old age? You know, and it does, I mean, what is it doing that people haven't done in apothecaries or herbalist places for centuries? So there are minerals, there are candles, there are, you know, remedies and flowers. I can't see what's new about all of that. Tried and trusted and tested ways of having a higher quality life. So please remember the Moon Cave and those two. I don't know if you know them personally. Their youngster Nick needs lots of positive energies at the moment. He's having a bit of a medical thing. So I know this isn't an evening for positive energies, but when you're in the evening for positive energies, please send them in that direction because they deserve it. Okay. Before I begin, please raise your hands for Joe, Nick, and Emily. Yeah! Now this is my, if anyone gets out of line, this is my power stick. What will I do? Cast a spell or knock you on the skull with it? Probably knock you on the skull with it because it's a venerable piece of carving, so it's not, oh, poor thing, I was not being hit with anybody. A bit about me, because I've been asked to introduce myself. David, are you an old hippie? Yes. Is that your excuse for doing things like this? Mostly. Right. So we're here to talk about sort of Halloween-y things. I'm going to shock you all. And of course it's debatable. Everything in life is debatable. I think Halloween's a Catholic festival. Now we get to the mysteries of the Celts. Those boys and girls go very deep, right? But were they celebrating, if that's the right word in that context, in the way we celebrate after an industrial revolution, people living in close cities and communities of the type they wouldn't have even known then? Your hearth, your extended family was your world. If there was a priest or a medicine man, it would have been your sort of grandfather. It wouldn't have been a designated role unless you were a wandering wizard of some sort. They did exist. So, you know, their outlook about festivals and celebrations was completely and totally and utterly different to ours. All these Catholics come along and they say, oh, can't we get booze into it somehow? So I'm following in an ancient tradition. And they sort of start the ball rolling of a festival, a religious festival, and you're looking at a long time ago. Tonight in the Catholic tradition is a night of reflection and meditation. It's a 3-day festival called All Hallowtide. Tonight you think about all the people you've ever had in your family, good and bad. Let's not get into that one. Good and bad. Tomorrow is All Saints' Day. So maybe there were saints in your family you never even noticed. Maybe old Aunt Doris really was a saint. You know, kind word for everybody, doing her bit. Maybe she was. The day afterwards is All Souls' Day, for those still struggling towards the light and trying to get further on. So everybody is remembered in this long ancestral festival, which is really what is behind this time of year. I called Catholic Demonology. My friend there's already asked me if I've gone blind through reading too much Catholic Demonology. So the answer, of course, is yes. I have hardly ever spoken about it ever. Catholic Angelology, the science of angels, yes, but not this stuff. I paraphrase this as tell me strange things, because this is the night of strangeness. A bit about me. I'm the Rev Dr. David William Parry. I'm a lifelong pacifist, therefore I'm not particularly popular at the moment in various circles. I'm a writer. I'm a playwright primarily. That shocks you, doesn't it, Steph? And I've done a bit of acting when my knees work properly, but not so much nowadays. Bit of directing. Let me think what else. I'm a liberal Catholic. Now, I had lots of trouble with dear Emily and Nick about what that is. There's a thing called Old Catholic, right? About 200 years ago, 250 years ago, in Holland, lots of Roman Catholics. Catholicism isn't one thing. It starts in different places. The Romans, with deep love and respect to them, they play a very clever game. Oh, you mean us? But actually, it started in Rome and Antioch and Alexandria exactly at the same time. They're smaller than the Romans, but they are Catholic. Certain Catholics from those other traditions met together in Holland, Utrecht, about 200 years ago, and said, well, this is all well and good, I mean, all a bit of fun, but what are all these hierarchies for and all of these rules? I mean, why aren't women priests? You know, why can't we even talk about it? So the Roman Church at that time decided to just shut everybody up. Please be quiet and go away. We didn't shut up or go away. Therefore, I'm with what they call the Old Catholic Apostolic Church, but I'm a liberal Catholic. You may have noticed bad grammar, all of that's my fault. And weird rewordings of the posters, all of that's my fault. Because the church wasn't interested in what I was doing, then it was interested in what I was doing. But I'm still a liberal, I'm not really an old Catholic. I'll explain why I think that's an important difference in a bit, because this guy was an old Catholic. So I'm on the very liberal tradition. We come out of the Syrian monasteries. We're all half-assed theosophists, anthroposophists. So there's a mystical leaning to everything we do. I have practiced white magic, which you can ask me about later. And that's sort of the other string to my bow, and maybe another reason we're here this evening. One sort of house rule, please. If you've got any questions, save them to the end. I'll talk for about an hour. We'll have a little Q&A. Then we'll get pissed. Okay? And I'll introduce my other and better half, and I'll explain why. We've both got some books to purchase. No pressure if you want to, except I've got the keys to the door and you don't get out. Right. Dan is... God, how do I explain Dan? He is he's Romanian Iranian, so you can imagine our Christmases are very complicated. He's a remarkable person who is a migrant, so don't get me on the migrant issue or I'll start shouting and screaming. That's the most important thing that's ever happened in my life, so I'm behind migrants. He's a bit of a clever dickie. He's got 2 master's degrees. He's written 3 books so far. They say he's a spy. Now, why do they say that? Not only is he currently doing his doctorate at the University of Glasgow on espionage, not a mean feat, but he's also written 2 books on espionage, one of which he's willing to sign this evening if anybody's interested. One of the other reasons we moved up here is this project started at King's College London, and he was doing government oversight of the intelligence community, with me getting more and more worried by the month. You know, all these people that look very official turning up to these seminars, who are they? Why are they all taking notes? Why are they asking weird questions like, who are you? You related? Oh my God. And also Dan was looking at the sorts of material where people go missing. Does that still happen? Yes, it does. Right. So now he's doing surveillance oversight. I thought my heart would beat a little better, but it's not. We're all practically slaves already. You ought to see some of the things I've read over the last couple of months, which he can talk about, I won't, because that's his magic for the evening and not mine. Let's begin. That's a bit about me. Oh, right, no one. My PhD is actually in moral theology. As you can see, I'm a terrible puff. Right. That's not only the gay thing there, that's the trans thing on the other side. Therefore, I wanted to know way back then, well, what are people actually saying about it all? And the answer is surprisingly little. It really wasn't one of the issues people were too worried about. And there are reasons for that too. But believe it or not, I'm getting a new PhD soon on concept art, where we're looking at concept art and conceptual writing, where we're looking at what people have done artistically about these ideas through the last couple of centuries. So if you see me walking down the street looking arty, that's because I am. I begin. My dear, we did that bit, right? What I'm going to say about this evening is you may disagree with me. Yeah, whatever. You may think, oh, we got the wrong end of the stick there. Yeah. You may know much more about these things than I do. Okay. This isn't a lecture. It's not in depth. We're looking at something and somebody who's interesting on Halloween night. That's all we're doing. You might be the biggest expert on Montague Summers in the world. I'm not claiming I am. You might be the biggest demonologist in the world. It's always the clown. I don't know, but remember, what we're doing is having a bit of fun. We're not laying down laws or regulations for each other. We're having a bit of fun and talking about a few interesting things. I thought differently about these topics 10 years ago. I'll probably think differently 10 years from now. That's just the way it is. Let's begin here. I do want to say one more thing about Catholicism, even if it bores you to death, do forgive me. I'm in what they call partial communion with Rome. Even if, there's something on TV and then there's the reality. Even if I'm wearing this, walking through the middle of Rome, they will call me father. Right? If you see it on TV, you'll think I'm beaten to death if I take a move in any direction. It's really not that simple. Right? Why? Because our lineage, my lineage, is not linked in with the 24 Latin churches of the Roman Rite, Roman Catholicism, but is linked with the 23 Eastern Catholic churches, the Armenian, Coptic, Ethiopian, Byzantine, East Syriac, West Syriac, Maronite, etc., which use a slightly different form of the Mass, much older and more mystical. Much older and more mystical. I think what happened to Catholic Mass, for various reasons, if there are any Catholics in the room, I promise I'm not attacking. All this is historically verifiable. What they did, they got worried by the power in these ceremonies about 300 years ago. There is huge power in these ceremonies. And they thought, oh, tone it down a bit in case all these Protestants murder us. They all murdered each other, don't worry. So that was what happened there. The Eastern rites didn't do that. Therefore, they've got a sort of different status in those cultures to the Roman people. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's the way it evolved. What are we celebrating tonight? The dead. The dead, of course, link in with anomalous phenomena. psychic materials, and so on. Now, I promised Steph I'd tell something real and scary. I have always had an interest in anomalous phenomena, always. For me, largely, it's a way of attacking the modernist enterprise. Not that I don't like modern hospitals, not that I don't like candles and wine, but I think if you're a modernist in the classic sense, it ties in with materialism. And if you're a materialist, you've already answered all the questions of life. And the answer is always no, 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 and no. That's too tidy, that's too neat, and it doesn't reflect the realities around us. First scary story for Steph. When I was down south, I had the honour of being invited to a number of occult societies to speak to them because they knew this was some of my interest. You meet some very, very interesting people at those places. I think the satanic panic started in this part of the world, but sort of they have equivalents down there. So I spoke about various things. There was one guy who will remain nameless who started attending all my talks, and people said, oh, he's a very powerful medium. But, okay. Went out for a drink, and he was saying, can you see this? Can you see that? And I was saying, no disrespect to you, but I think over alcohol, that really just doesn't do anything. It doesn't work. I mean, the first principle of occultism is meditation. Can you discipline the mind to put those energies where you want to project them, where you want to put them? If you're half sozzled, that isn't going to happen unless you're a monster. So really the two don't, I'm not saying never, the two don't often meet. The guy came to my house after knowing him for a couple of years and said, all right, can you see this? And I couldn't believe what was happening. You see the size of this candle? Little heads started appearing around his head. They were like photographic negatives. This literally all around the chin, the side. They'd form, they'd turn into a terrible expression and dissipate. And this went on and on and on. And yet it's not something you see every day of the week. So I didn't know what my reaction was. I was sat in a soft comfy chair staring at all of this and suddenly thought, oh my God, this guy is bringing all these negative energies into my apartment and he feels he can do that. And what does that mean? This is so scary. Get out. A couple of months later, the spiritualists down there, not the SNU, not that I'm attacking them, it's just not much happens in SNU circles, said, we're going to show you some ectoplasm. Didn't believe it. I was invited to a talk and a sort of mild ceremony where something did happen. One of the mediums, the physical medium, was at the front of the room. And it's always a sort of trigger. I think the trigger's for them more than their audience. Can you see this? Can you see this? But we all did. Something electrical and amber coloured. That's real ectoplasm. Formed and shot across the length of the ceiling and then dropped. Gone. When you see, if you ever have the Victorian mock-ups of spiritualist seances, remember they're meant to be mock-ups, the spirit appearing and looking out of the cotton wool, because they didn't know how to represent what I've just described. Does this mean I'm mad? Who knows? Does this mean they were all mad? Let's look at this in a different way. I think psychology is probably the oldest of the sciences, not the newest. I spent a lot of time with the Jung Club in London, Carl Gustav Jung. I don't know if you've heard of him. They're a very famous psychologist who worked with Freud. And they would say, if the psyche is not in front of you and not inside you, there is nothing. What is it that isn't psyche? What is it that isn't you? What is it that you think should be there that isn't there? What objectivity? What objectivity? The fact I'm here and breathing heavily because my knees are killing me, the fact my friends are here, isn't that objective? But it's subjective. So the psyche is in front of us all the time. So why are these things from the psyche, from the mind? Of course they are. Where else would they be from? Does that mean they're not real? No, it doesn't. because how can things like that be unreal? There are parts of the world at the moment that are going to war over a couple of misspoken words. Therefore, how much more can a human being do if they really put their minds to it? From my own view, all this needs further study. I think, as I say, the great mistake of even us liberal Catholics is to allow the mainstream churches, all of them, they're all as bad, to turn into sort of, what happened to the church? My God, if you've got a spare couple of weeks, I'll tell you exactly what I think. It changed into a school for doctrines as opposed to a hospital for souls. If I'd have said anything like this in the Middle Ages, I'd have got a pat on the back. If I'd have said it 200 years ago, I'd have been burnt as a witch. The other reason we're all here this evening is I've heard stories about witches being killed at that castle. Am I saying there are no evil people in the world? No. Am I saying all the witches were good and none of them are evil? No, I'm not, and I'll tell you why. I am saying that, let's face it, 99% of them were not what they said they were. They were women, mostly older women, who had no social status and no social standing, who were used as scapegoats for social cohesion. Wow, that is a bad thing to do. And it happened. The other thing about my biography, I suppose, I spent a lot of time in Central Asia. I was the chairman of the Eurasian Creative Guild at one point. Central Asia isn't Punjab. I can't do the accent and wave the head, I'm sorry. I used to be able to. I can't. So Central Asia is, you go past Turkey, but you stop before you get to China. So that's Central Asia. They're all devastatingly beautiful. They're sort of half Turkic and half Chinese. And it's something about the shape of the eyes and the colour of the skin. And they're just devastating, all of them, devastatingly beautiful. In that part of the world, you still get societies of evil people. And they're very proud of it. They will tell you. As a foreigner, you're not part of it. So, I didn't have to, don't worry. If you are part of the culture, be careful. I come from a family of thieves. My family have been thieves for hundreds of years. Your property is not safe with us. I come from a murderous family or a strangler's family. And that is seen as just the way the world is. It's unwise to take that sort of, now I offend everybody, that sort of Corbynite Labour, everybody's just sad and misunderstood. Everybody's sad and misunderstood, but that's not the whole of the picture. Some people are bastards. It's as simple as that. Most of our ancestors were bastards. They had different lives to us and different pressures. They didn't know as much of the world as we do. There we are. Where did the church go wrong? I got back to it. Psychology started with the churchman before you get to the Middle Ages. What do you think confession is? Instead of lying on a couch with Dr. Freud at your side, you go into this little private place with a priest. It could have been a nun in those days. And saying, I've got this sickness of the soul. I don't know what is up with me. I have these thoughts that I need to kill myself. My life is going nowhere. I don't know what is up with me. And the priest would listen. And they pray. And you might get a kiss on the forehead. Come back in a month's time. Come back next week. Whoa, that's psychotherapy. The worst thing the church ever did was say, we don't want to do that anymore. There's no money in it. They're kidding. They pushed all that out and we became schools of doctrines. You will think this and you will think that, or you'll burn in hell forever. That is where it went wrong, and maybe that needs to come back if we're going to be a sane, sober, happy society, just maybe. So for me, the seeing of the heads and the seeing of the electrical stuff made total sense, because what was I seeing? Psychology, the psyche, the extended mind, and that's just the beginning of it all. Who knows how much further all these things can go. Remember, I was only invited to look and experience. I wasn't invited at that time to partake. Evil. Let's talk about evil. That young lady's wearing evil, although for some reason she's decided to deliberately defy me and turn it off when she knows I love those skeletons really lovely. Evil. Right, the trained academic part of me. What are you talking about? Is there such a thing? I have no idea. but people's views of evil is different. If you talk to modern Protestants, and again, I'm not attacking anybody, please, and it's a valid point of view, you get this sort of Star Wars attitude. There's the evil emperor staggering in the starship, and I'm going to destroy you all. Right? And then you get the young Luke Skywalker, back you bounder, I'll stop you in your tracks. So you've got the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, and sugar. You've got all these things clashing in this battle of opposites. That is one view of evil. Weirdly, that's not the Catholic view of evil. For once, I'm on the side of the angels and on the mainstream. There was a guy called Thomas Aquinas, known as the Angelic Doctor, the ox of learning because he was so fat. I can beat that. He said, no, you're all wrong. One of the greatest minds in human history. No, all that's nonsense. What you have is like a God principle or a mind or a spirit or something inbuilt into nature, and it's perfect. All it can do is see its own perfection. It can't even see us. And it tries, it knows something's going on, but it can't, because all of that's like a dream, like a nightmare. It's not real, and that's perfect and totally real. So what is evil? Evil is a falling away from perfection. Demons. Demons are those beings, those primary beings, those beings at the beginning that fell away for whatever reason. There were strange stories in those days amongst the Sufis. Being in the presence of God is bloody hard work. Well, what does that mean? And some couldn't hold on to this vision. It was just too energized. It was too much. It was too great. It was too big. And they fell. And some became very famous names. But as you fall away from goodness and beauty and truth and power and life, you begin to lose all those things. They become less in you, and you fall into darkness and weakness and tininess and ugliness. Demons in the real Catholic tradition are like shipwrecks, something that has gone wrong. And they try to animate themselves from time to time, it's said, but they can't do it. The strength has left them, the animating force has left them. They've lost that vision. So that's a completely different view from the Protestant view. Again, who knows who's right and who's wrong? Not saying that. But remember, the demonic in Catholic tradition, if it's orthodox, it's got a rather sad view of life, a rather sad view of the world. Could it be better? Yes. How is it made better? We all do our little bit to make it a bit better. Go and give your mum a hug when she's being an old cow. Give your brother a hug. Boyfriends, girlfriends, take them out for dinner. Just little extra good things, and that builds you up and up and up into the light. But, I'm not speaking to him. What a bastard. That pulls you down and down and down, and the choice is yours. The choice is yours. Catholicism. Curiously, Montague Summers had the first view, not the second view. He always said he was a champion of Catholic orthodoxy, which is a bit odd if you don't have the view of evil that the mainstream churches do. That it's just a sad thing. It's not this operatic empowerment. That's a very Protestant view. Oh, by the way, that fat bugger has been haunting me for years. I think it's because I've got a bit of weight on me. It's because I'm a clergyman and I'm into theatre as well. He was quite a theatrical guy. So I think that's the I hope that's the overlap. Which is why I sort of get cast in that particular shadow, but I hope that's as far as it goes. Monty, I'm not even sure I like him. How about that? He was an old Catholic. I met someone recently. Have you heard of, not Stuart Hampshire. Dan, the guy I had a row with. Sean Manchester, Bishop Sean Manchester. Have you heard of the Highgate Vampire? I've met him. Beat that, Steph. Right, Bishop Manchester is not a pleasant man. Right? Bishop Manchester would have me burnt at the stake and all of you thrown on as faggots underneath. Right? because he's got a Montague Summers look. Old Catholicism. You're more Catholic than the Pope. You're more Catholic than anybody who's ever been in history. It is you and nobody else. Inquisition's great. Let's have more. You know, torture people for their thoughts. Make them admit they were wrong. Mistress, do you accept the Trinity? What? Couldn't hear it. You know, all of that sort of stuff. I can't see the sense in that. That strikes me as vaguely psychopathic. Old Catholicism isn't always that bad, but if it goes to in extremis, that is what it becomes. Liberal Catholics disagree with all of that and think you go in the other direction. Right? Right. Monty is one of those people. So let's begin with a story. Montague Summers was a very odd man, a fascinating man. He went to Dennis Wheatley. You've heard of Dennis Wheatley? Remember, I don't know you, so I don't know what you've heard and what you haven't heard. The occult writer. Dennis Wheatley was posh. He spent more time writing about wine tasting than he ever did occultism. So he'd have been, what's that place you were at again? Yeah, he'd have been up there non-stop. So, you know, oh, what a damn fine wine! So that was Dennis Wheatley. He suddenly realised he had a good, you know, a knack to tell a good yarn. So he wrote The Devil Rides Out, one of my favourite movies. Don't you think I'm like Charles Gray? One of my favourite movies. Much nicer, you know, this heroic battle of good and evil. Sir Christopher Lee. I used to know Christopher Lee. What a tart. I'll tell you a story in a minute about him. So, you know, oh, go back, you terrible overactor. And, you know, everything gets worked out at the end. I rather like that story. I rather like that production. I don't like To the Devil a Daughter because it just strikes me as unpleasant. The priest, the defrocked priest into The Devil a Daughter is actually based on Montague Summers. Aleister Crowley, have you heard of him? The Great Beast. What a fat bugger that man is. Right, so this is where I'm not divided on religious grounds. I'm divided on theatrical grounds. You know, sorry, you know, if I'm rehearsing, if someone's turning up for an audition, I don't want the biggest ego in history in front of me. Can you do the job? It's really that simple. You know, can you be that tree, darling? It's really that simple. You know, so the biggest ego in history. So you've got to like him. You know, invite him to dinner. So Dennis Wheatley invited him to dinner and Montague Summers. So technically, there should have been two enemies there. The classic witch and the classic witch finder. And of course, they got on like a house on fire. So surprise, surprise. Is it the same sort of mind? Is it the same sort of mind? Mrs. Wheatley saying, those two are never coming here again. Apparently, the whole evening was witty and fun and loads of wine and loads of alcohol. With Monty coming away saying, everything that man has said needs to be written down and studied. And Big Al reciprocating by, what a learned demonologist. I have never met anyone like him in my life. What a scholar. So those two got on despite the so-called differences, which says something about Montague Summers. He's not the only person in clergy circles, by the way, that has had an interest in demonology, anomalous phenomena, psychic materializations, and so on. There were two other people I want to throw at you. I don't know if we're doing this again, but I'm thinking of setting up a reading stroke depth meditation circle, maybe sometime next year, to see if anyone's interested and they want to explore this further. Next year, let me have a second Christmas here, for God's sake. Yeah, that's next year. The two I'm thinking of are Martin Israel and Malachi Martin. Martin Israel was an Anglican, Church of England, very highly qualified psychologist. He used to run prayer retreats where he was saying roughly what I'm saying. Look, all of this is something to do with psychology. Can't you see that? If we have to explore it, to let the healing, deep, deep healing, come into every part of your being. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Malachi Martin didn't like what they call the Second Vatican Council. That's when all of us liberal people turn up and say enough's enough. He thought that was the wrong route for the church, so he had a medieval view of it all. And he might be right. Remember, at the end of the day, he might be right. It's just, I think he's wrong. You know, witch burning, all that's got to come back, and, you know, exorcisms and all that's got to come back. I've been involved in a number of exorcisms. We'll talk about that later. So, again, a highly qualified psychologist and a writer of novels. So other people have been involved in all of this as well, which gets me to Monty. Excuse me. Best known and understood as an English clergyman, occultist, practicing occultist, author and teacher. Initially, he pursued his vocation through the Church of England by being ordained as a deacon. I believe the date is 1908. I think there's a bit of an argument over that, but it seems to be around there, or thereabouts to my recollection. That was somewhere in Oxford and Lichfield or Lichfield. However, Summers converted to what he understood to be Roman Catholicism and began to style himself accordingly. If you ever get the chance, look at Wikipedia or any of these pictures. He's got the sort of Elizabethan buns on it. You have man buns, but not at the back, either side of the head. And he's got this cummerbund. Well, I've got to get one of those. And, you know, the sort of old gas and gaiters look. It looks great, but it also looks scary. So he styled himself in that way. But weirdly, he actually was never officiated into any of the Roman religious orders or a Catholic diocese. So when he started writing all this stuff, believe it or not, the Roman Church got quite uppity. Sorry, who ordained you? You're attacking everybody. We can't find you on any list from anywhere. Weirdly, he went quiet. He didn't fight back. He just went quiet. So, all in all, he kept body and soul together by teaching English as well as Latin, which in those days was a good combination, while independently researching English drama in the 17th century. Indeed, this latter pursuit, this latter vocation, earned him an election into the Royal Society of Literature in 1916. That is difficult to get into, so you're not looking at an underachiever. Well, employed as a schoolmaster, that went horribly wrong, for reasons you can probably guess. Impropriety was mentioned. You've got to remember you're dealing with a time when people weren't sure about sexuality and gender. Right, so what's the official position scientifically? There are two sexualities. There are loads of genders. So no one's saying, you know, everything is up for grabs. They're saying the baseline is the two primary types. And of course, even that can be more complex because you get hermaphrodites, you get androgens, all of which are scientifically catalogued. So nobody's saying even that's hard and fast. What they're saying is that's sort of the main thrust of what nature is doing in us. You know, the vast majority will be male and female, but that's when the whole storm kicks off. What do you mean male? What do you mean female? How female is that woman? How male is that man? And so on and so on and so on. Is it just genitalia? Well, that's easy then. Or is it more than that? Is it the way the mind and the body interact with each other? I mean, what is it? A new branch of science. So all you're going to see for the next 100 years is loads of people arguing as the evidence is slowly digested and people make more sense of it. So does anybody really know what they're talking about at the moment? No, but it's an interesting row, and, you know, let them do likewise. Let them do likewise. It's important that that developed. The minute you get outside Anglophone cultures, say India, the mother of everything, they would think you were a total savage if you thought there were less than 6 types of sexuality. You're just not worth talking to. You're a Western savage. What they mean by that, we've never been able to translate, because they're using words and concepts which seem to be amalgams. You know, they're not joining them and mixing them up. It's much more complex than that. And it's based on a series of studies no one's ever translated. Medical texts going back and back and back and back, but no one's ever... And not because there's a conspiracy. Who's got the money? Who's got the time? Does it really, you know, mean much to most people? Medical history? No, it doesn't. So, as I say, it depends what part of the world you're in. China's even worse, by the way. This whole yin-yang stuff, right? Remember, there's no yang without yin in it. There's no yin without yang in it. So, male, female, but more and less. Monty, am I defending Montague Summers? No, I am not. But I am saying it's at a time when people didn't have the category gay or homosexual. Words like people are born. They're born from a context and they mature like a flower. They spread their petals and they find meaning and eventually they die like people. So the idea of homosexuality was known in the ancient world, but not in the way we know it now. Gay certainly was not known. Lesbian was sort of known, but not really in the way that we know it, you know. And what did they mean? Because it's all so long ago and the languages are much more complicated. We don't know. Interesting stuff. Monty was accused of impropriety. Was he gay? I don't know. In my particular case, I don't think so. Was he doing things he shouldn't have been doing? Possibly. But there was a trial and he was acquitted. Was it his enemies spreading nastiness? That's possible. Was he misunderstood? We're all misunderstood, but don't start fiddling. Right? So we don't know. There's a question mark there, right? Let me take a sip of water. Which is why I suppose my interest in him started with theatre as opposed to anything else. Well, working as a schoolmaster with the encouragement of Arthur Henry Bullen of the Shakespeare Head Press, Monty established himself as an independent scholar specialising on the dramatic literature of the Stuart Restoration. Summers successively edited the plays of Aphra Behn. Feminism is vitally important, but feminism is American. There's nothing unusual in Europe in rich and powerful women. Queen Victoria, Elizabeth I, no one told them what to do or what to think, or they'd have been dead. There's nothing unusual in that here. Witch! Yeah, maybe, but nothing unusual. Nothing unusual. In terms of drama, there was a woman he studied. Do go and read her plays if you get the chance, called Aphra Behn. She was a successful professional playwright hundreds of years ago. She made a living out of it. She thought men were silly, and she thought the critics didn't know what they were talking about. My plays are as good as his. And she stood her ground. You know, are there loads and loads of people like that? No, because there are loads and loads of playwrights. But, you know, it's just not true. It's not there. Let's look at what the treasures are and revive them. That's more exciting than this American, it was never there, I think. Aphra Behn, William Congreve, William Wycherley, that's just a coincidence, Thomas Otway, Thomas Shadwell and John Dryden. Summers' work on the theatre of the Restoration earned him election as Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, as I say, in 1916. Summers also helped to create a new society called the Phoenix Society that performed these neglected works and which operated from 1919 to 1925. Excuse me. It was succeeded by Renaissance Theatre, which gave occasional performances until 1928. Summers wrote extensive programme notes for these productions and offered his scholarly advice during rehearsals. That work made Summers a well-known and popular figure in theatrical circles, so I'm not the only one, and it was going on then as well. Noted for his eccentric personality, Summers, Monty became a well-known figure in London society generally, particularly after he wrote, actually his masterpiece, The History of Witchcraft and Demonology in 1926. Now you've got to remember it's 1926, not 1826, not 1666. No one was writing about those things by then, and they thought he was mad. He's got a huge brain. He's writing in at least 3 different languages, and he's writing about case studies because he thinks, no. Everyone else wants things nice and easy and neat and tidy, and life isn't like that. It's messy and complicated, and all this weird stuff is happening all the time, and we may not understand it, but who cares? The point is it's happening. A friend of mine met a werewolf, youngster. Sometimes in scholarly work, because everybody is underfunded, which is why I've never wanted to do it, You have to take stuff home, no matter how big you are as a professor. You have to take stuff home like homework and work on it at home. Anne Ross. Now, I didn't know her, but I knew people that knew her. Her kids were playing. She lived near one of these megalithic sites, Midlands somewhere. The kids were playing around one day in one of these, so you get these panoramic gardens, they stretch into the hills and the fields, and no one's quite sure where your boundary is or what's beyond it. They were throwing stones at each other. Is that what kids do in the Midlands? Oh my God. And isn't that dangerous? And, they were unearthing new artillery to throw at each other. And weirdly, at the same time, they both uncovered a head. A head that looked like a Celtic warrior from Celtic times. Thought nothing of it. Took it into the house, and my dear friend's friend, said, "That's a Celtic warrior. Where did you find that?" And they said, "Mum, tea." So she put it in her study and left it there. Then strange things started happening. How do you know when strange things are starting to happen? It always begins with an atmosphere. The phenomena, for whatever reason, cannot suddenly manifest. It needs an atmosphere, like an energy pool creating itself. That would start, the temperature would drop. Oh, chilly in here. Feelings of being watched. Oh, I've got my back to the wall. How can that happen? I feel like I'm being watched. Bottles being thrown from one end of the room to the other. Telekinesis, things shooting and flying and landing. It got so bad that her neighbours started complaining, the Dobsons. Someone said to her at one point, "What have you got in your house?" And she said, "Oh, my work. I've got my work in my house." And they said, "No, there's something else. There's all this stuff coming from your house." My daughter said that she saw a half man, half goat coming out of your house and walking towards ours. How do you explain that? Curiously, in Celtic circles, there were goat cults that spoke about beings like that. Also, I got to remember the date. It's in my diaries. It's not here. At that particular date, they'd had lots of trouble in the Midlands with goat suckers. Have you heard of them? Beings you sort of half see, and they attack your livestock. I'm sorry if you're a farmer, that's deadly, right? They're all worth money, And yeah, they suck the blood out of these living goats, and they leave them staggered, shivering, bloodless in the fields. And then transfusions have to be given. It's a well-known phenomenon in that part of the world. Also, some of the warriors in the past would dress like goats. No one knows why. Wolves, that's easy. Goats, why? Right, they're willful. What would be the point of dressing like a goat? Excuse me. All this kept going on. They felt an energy flow was coming from her house to theirs, and they weren't happy. Then it started in her house, like a nexus forming, a battery building. She couldn't rest, she couldn't sleep, she couldn't do work, she didn't know why. Woke up one morning and there's a werewolf staring at her from the end of the bed. Half man, half wolf, and looking her in the eyes. She tried to scream and she couldn't. She tried to gulp and she couldn't. And she said if she didn't know differently, there looked like a smile on its mouth. The daughter makes a noise, "Mum!" coming home from school. The thing, whatever it was, a delusion, a dream, a nightmare, suddenly realizes the psychic atmosphere has changed, the balance of energies has changed, rushes out of the bedroom and goes down into the kitchen area and is gone. The daughter, now remember, why is this important? You're looking at different people who aren't collaborating on stories, giving a continuous narrative about something that shouldn't exist in the first place. She started screaming as she was coming into the kitchen area because what she saw was a werewolf-like figure vaulting over the stairrail, rushing into the kitchen and dissipating, gone. At that point, my dear friend's friend took the heads back to the local museum and said, "I'm not working on them anymore in Surrey. Good luck." And I don't know what happened after that. but that is a true story which is down in scientific literature as an anomalous phenomena that no one can work out at all. Is it a dream? Maybe. But some dreams have more reality and more substance to them than others. Which is why Montague Summers took an absolutely vile book very seriously. He was the first person, as far as I know, to translate into English a vile book called the Malleus Maleficarum, The Hammer of the Witches, written by Henrik Kramer, a German Catholic scholar who was convinced, again, the old Catholic mentality, that witches were everywhere. I blame Lance, but witches are everywhere. And they've got to be stamped out. So, you know, you're not looking at any sort of group hugs and people around trees and getting together. You're not looking at anything like that. I don't know where that leaves people like me or the followers of Carl Jung. I mean, the first thing it says is anyone that interprets dreams as a witch. I mean, in psychotherapy, that's the first thing you do. So, and it goes on and on and on. It lists all the tortures and all the things you have to do to these poor people. He felt that was a major contribution to the debate as arguably the most seminal 20th century purveyor of pop culture occultism. You know, what these things mean on a more refined level, who knows? But, you know, if you're giving people scary stories and the devil rides out into the devil a daughter, on that level, people do know. Excuse me. In the following pages, he said,